Find another seat, sweetheart. This one's taken. The words landed before Monica Reed had even set her carry-on beneath the overhead bin. Flight 482 to Seattle was scheduled to depart in less than 20 minutes, and the first-class cabin had the polished calm of a place where people expected to get their way. Richard Collins certainly looked like one of them. The white passenger lounged comfortably in seat 2A, Monica's seat, one ankle resting across his knee as if he had owned the space for years. He didn't glance at her boarding pass. He didn't ask a question. He simply smiled and pointed toward the rear of the aircraft. Monica stood still. At 45 years old, she had learned that some people made decisions about her before she ever spoke a word. She wore dark jeans, white sneakers, and a simple black sweater. No designer logos. No jewelry worth mentioning. Nothing that announced status. Nothing that suggested power. Around them, passengers settled into leather seats, adjusted reading lights, and scrolled through phones. A few glanced up, sensing tension. Most looked away. They always did at first. "Sir," Monica said calmly, holding up her boarding pass. "That's my seat." Richard chuckled as though she had delivered the punchline to a joke. Then the airline made a mistake. Before Monica could respond, a flight attendant approached. Nicole Harper, mid-30s, perfect uniform, professional smile, the kind of smile that vanished the second it became inconvenient. She looked at Monica, then at Richard, then back at Monica. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "He's sitting in my assigned seat," Monica replied. Nicole glanced at the boarding pass for barely a second. "Perhaps there's been a last-minute adjustment," she said. Richard leaned back, visibly pleased. "That's what I was telling her." Monica noticed the wording. "Not me. Her." The distinction was subtle but familiar. Nicole tapped her tablet. "Why don't we find you another seat?" Around them, heads began to turn. A businessman across the aisle lowered his newspaper. A young couple exchanged looks. The air inside the cabin wasn't quiet anymore. It felt charged. Monica kept her expression neutral. "I purchased seat 2A, she said. "I'd like seat 2A. Nicole's smile tightened. "Ma'am, we're trying to avoid delaying departure." There it was. The shift. The suggestion that Monica was creating the problem rather than responding to one. Richard folded his arms. Some people just can't let things go. A few passengers laughed softly. Monica heard it. Every word. Every assumption. Yet she didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She simply stood there, steady as a lighthouse in rough water. At the front of the cabin, boarding continued. Outside the window, baggage crews moved beneath the evening sun. Everything appeared normal. But something had already broken. A choice had been made. Not by Monica. By everyone rushing to protect the man occupying a seat that wasn't his. Nicole looked down at her tablet again. "I'm going to need you to cooperate." Monica studied her face for a moment. Then she slowly slipped her phone from her pocket. The movement seemed insignificant, almost invisible. Yet somewhere beyond the aircraft doors, beyond the terminal, beyond the assumptions filling row 2, events had already begun moving in a direction none of them could see. And the first person to realize that would not be Monica. It would be the people who believed she didn't belong there. Monica slipped her phone back into her pocket and remained standing beside row 2 while the cabin settled into an uneasy silence. Nicole seemed satisfied that the matter was nearly over. Richard certainly was. He adjusted the cuff of his expensive jacket and looked out the window as though Monica no longer existed. That was the remarkable thing about assumptions. Once people decided who you were, they stopped seeing you altogether. Around the cabin, passengers quietly chose sides. Some did it openly. Others did it with a glance, a shrug, or the decision to stay silent. A man in the front row shook his head. "It is one seat," he muttered. "Just take another one." A woman across the aisle nodded in agreement. To them, the issue seemed simple. A seat. A minor inconvenience. A small compromise to keep everyone moving. They did not understand that the seat itself was no longer the point. Monica had spent 20 years building companies, negotiating billion-dollar contracts, and leading organizations through crises. She knew exactly how unfair systems survived. They survived because people learned to accept small wrongs before larger ones appeared. Nicole glanced toward the boarding door and then back at Monica. "Ma'am, I need an answer. Are you willing to relocate?" Monica looked directly at her. "No," the single word landed with surprising weight. Nearby conversation stopped. Nicole blinked. Richard laughed under his breath. Unbelievable. The flight attendant straightened her posture. Then you are delaying departure for everyone on this aircraft. Monica noticed several passengers looking at her with growing irritation. Not at Richard. Not at the man occupying a seat that was not assigned to him. At her. The pressure had shifted exactly where Nicole wanted it. A young flight attendant standing near the galley watched quietly. Her name tag read Emily Foster. Unlike the others, she was not speaking. She was observing. Her eyes moved from Monica's boarding pass to Richard's seat number and then to the electronic device in Nicole's hand. Something about her expression suggested uncertainty. Nicole, Emily said carefully, would you like me to double-check the seating manifest? Nicole answered immediately. That will not be necessary. The response came too fast. Emily seemed surprised. Monica noticed it. So did a few passengers nearby. For the first time, a small crack appeared in the story everyone had been told. Richard sensed it too. Can we move this along, he asked. Some of us paid for first class. Monica turned toward him. So did I. Richard smiled again, but this time it looked less confident. Outside, the jet bridge remained connected. The aircraft doors were still open. Boarding continued. Yet the atmosphere inside row 2 felt strangely frozen, as if the entire cabin were waiting for something none of them could identify. Emily glanced once more at Nicole's device. Then she looked at Monica. There was no hostility in her face, only curiosity. Nicole noticed the exchange and stepped between them. Please return to your duties, Emily. Of course, Emily replied, though she did not sound convinced. As she walked away, Monica saw her glance back one final time. The moment lasted only a second. Most people missed it completely. Monica did not, because she had learned long ago that every system, no matter how flawed, eventually produced one person willing to question what everyone else accepted. And somewhere near the front of the aircraft, Emily Foster had just begun asking herself the first question. Nicole's confidence seemed to grow with every passing second. The longer Monica remained standing, the more the flight attendant behaved as though the situation had already been decided. She tapped her device again and turned slightly toward another crew member near the front galley. We may need customer resolution assistance, she said. The phrase sounded professional, neutral, almost harmless. Yet everyone in the cabin understood what it meant. Monica was being treated as the problem. Richard smiled openly now. This is getting ridiculous, he said loudly enough for several rows to hear. The seat is occupied. Surely there are bigger things to worry about. A few passengers nodded. One man pulled out his headphones and muttered, just move her somewhere else. Monica noticed how quickly facts disappeared once a narrative took hold. Richard had taken a seat assigned to someone else. That was the fact. Yet somehow she had become the obstacle. Nicole looked at her again. Ma'am, according to the information available to me, there appears to be a discrepancy. Monica raised an eyebrow. A discrepancy? Your seat assignment may have changed. May have, Monica asked calmly. Nicole hesitated. Only for a moment. The system updates constantly. Monica had spent years leading organizations. She knew when someone was explaining a situation and when someone was inventing one. Around the cabin, uncertainty spread. People were no longer hearing one explanation. They were hearing several. First it had been a last-minute adjustment. Then a seating issue. Now a system discrepancy. The story kept changing. Emily Foster noticed it too. Standing near the galley, she quietly opened her own crew device. Her eyes scanned the passenger list. She frowned. Then she looked again. Whatever she saw caused her posture to stiffen. Before she could say anything, Nicole caught sight of her. Emily, she called sharply. Focus on boarding. Emily lowered the device. Of course. But Monica saw something important. Emily had not looked confused. She had looked surprised. Richard shifted in seat 2A and crossed his arms. You know, he said, looking directly at Monica. People make mistakes. Most reasonable adults understand that. Monica met his gaze. Some mistakes are accidents. Richard's smile faded slightly. And some are not. Exactly. The temperature inside the cabin seemed to drop a few degrees. Not physically. Emotionally. The atmosphere had become tense enough that even passengers pretending not to watch were listening closely. Nicole stepped forward again. Sir, she said to Richard, thank you for your patience. Monica almost smiled. Thank you for your patience. Richard was sitting comfortably in someone else's seat while being praised for his patience. The irony was almost impressive. A businessman 2 rows back finally spoke up. Can someone just verify the manifest? The question lingered in the air. Simple, reasonable, logical. Nicole answered immediately. We already have. Emily's eyes widened slightly. It was a subtle reaction, but Monica caught it. Because Emily knew something the rest of the cabin did not. Nicole had not verified anything. The young flight attendant looked down at her device again, then toward Monica, then away. She was wrestling with something. Duty, fear, truth. The three often collided in moments like these. Outside the aircraft window, the last bags were being loaded. Departure should have been minutes away. Instead, tension continued building inside row 2. Monica remained calm, unmoved, patient. She had seen boardrooms collapse under less pressure than this cabin was creating. And somewhere behind Nicole's polished smile and Richard's fading confidence, the first cracks in their version of the story were beginning to show. Emily Foster tried to focus on boarding, but the numbers on her screen refused to leave her mind. She had checked the passenger manifest twice, then a third time. The result never changed. Seat 2A belonged to Monica Reed. Not Richard Collins. Not anyone else. Monica Reed. The name sat clearly on the display, attached to a priority designation Emily had never seen before. She swallowed hard. New employees learned quickly that airlines ran on procedures. Questioning senior crew members could create problems. Yet standing only a few feet away was a passenger being treated as though she had done something wrong when the system showed exactly the opposite. Emily glanced toward Monica again. The woman remained remarkably calm. No raised voice. No dramatic gestures. No demands. Just quiet certainty. That certainty bothered Emily more than anger would have. People who were bluffing usually became emotional. Monica looked like someone waiting for the truth to catch up with the room. Nicole continued speaking with practiced authority. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We expect to close the boarding door shortly. The announcement sounded routine, but several passengers exchanged skeptical looks. Everyone could see the situation was far from resolved. Richard shifted comfortably in seat 2A and smiled toward a businessman across the aisle. Amazing what people will argue about these days, he said. A few chuckles followed. Monica said nothing. Emily looked down at the manifest again. Then she noticed something else. A timestamp. The seating assignment had not changed. There had been no update, no reassignment, no correction. The record remained exactly as it had been when boarding began. Emily felt her stomach tighten. The explanation Nicole had given the cabin was impossible. She took a slow breath and stepped forward. Nicole, she said carefully, may I speak with you for a moment? The senior flight attendant turned immediately. What is it? Privately. Nicole hesitated before following her a few feet toward the galley. The conversation was quiet, but several nearby passengers watched closely. Emily lowered her voice. The manifest still shows Monica Reed in seat 2A. Nicole's expression hardened instantly. You are mistaken. I checked 3 times. Then check a 4th. Emily blinked. But the assignment is right there. Nicole folded her arms. Your responsibility is assisting passengers, not interpreting system data. The answer felt less like guidance and more like a warning. Emily looked back toward Monica. Their eyes met briefly. Monica did not smile. She did not signal. She simply waited. Somehow that made the situation even harder to ignore. Across the cabin, a woman in first class leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Something does not add up." Another passenger nodded. Doubt was spreading now. Slowly, quietly, like cracks forming beneath polished marble. Emily returned to her position, but she could no longer pretend everything was normal. She had seen the record herself. She knew who belonged in seat 2A. More importantly, she knew someone else knew it too. Nicole. For the first time since boarding began, Emily stopped wondering whether a mistake had occurred. Now she was asking a different question entirely. If the truth was sitting in plain sight, why was everyone working so hard to hide it? The mood inside the cabin shifted again when Nicole picked up the interphone mounted near the front galley. Her voice remained professional, but the tension beneath it was impossible to miss. We may require additional assistance before departure, she said. Several passengers exchanged uneasy looks. The phrase traveled through the cabin faster than any announcement. Richard seemed encouraged by it. He leaned back farther into seat 2A and folded his hands across his chest. There we go, he said. Now maybe we can get moving. Monica looked at him calmly. You seem very confident. Richard shrugged. I know how these situations end. The answer hung in the air. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it, as though the outcome had never been in doubt, as though people like Monica were expected to lose these arguments before they even began. Nicole stepped forward once more. "Ma'am, if you continue refusing our proposed accommodation, we may have to delay the flight further." Monica studied her face. "You mean the accommodation that requires me to surrender the seat I paid for?" Nicole did not answer directly. Instead, she repeated the language of policy, procedure, and cooperation. The words sounded polished, safe, yet they never addressed the actual problem. Across the aisle, a passenger finally spoke up. "Can someone explain why the person assigned to the seat is the one being asked to move?" Silence followed. Nicole glanced toward the speaker, but offered no response. Emily lowered her eyes. The question was the same one she had been asking herself for the last 10 minutes. Monica remained standing beside row 2, composed despite the growing pressure around her. But inside her mind, another memory surfaced. She was 26 years old again, standing inside an airport lounge after a long business trip. She remembered presenting her membership credentials to an employee who looked at her, then looked at the card, then asked if it belonged to someone else. She remembered the embarrassment, the quiet stares, the feeling of needing to prove she belonged in a place she had already earned access to. Years later, the details had faded. The feeling had not. Back in the present, Richard let out a short laugh. "You know what the real issue is?" he said loudly. "People always want special treatment these days." A few passengers looked uncomfortable. Others stared at their phones. Monica met his eyes. "Special treatment? That is right." He gestured around the cabin. "The rules apply to everyone." Monica nodded slowly. "Then perhaps they should apply to you." For the first time, Richard did not have an immediate reply. Emily watched the exchange carefully. The more she listened, the less convincing the official explanation sounded. Then Nicole's device emitted a soft notification tone. She glanced down at the screen. Whatever appeared there caused a brief flicker of concern to cross her face. It lasted less than a second, but Monica noticed it. So did Emily. The flight attendant quickly locked the screen and slipped the device against her side. Yet something had changed. The certainty that had carried her through the confrontation was beginning to crack. And while the rest of the cabin still believed this dispute was about a seat, Monica knew the truth. The seat had only been the beginning. The notification on Nicole's device should have been insignificant. A routine update, a scheduling message, something ordinary. Yet the moment she saw it, her confidence shifted. Monica recognized the change immediately. People revealed themselves most clearly when certainty left the room. Nicole looked toward the boarding door, then toward the cockpit, then back at her screen. Richard noticed it as well. "What is going on now?" he asked. "Nothing," Nicole replied too quickly. "Everything is under control." But the cabin no longer believed her. Passengers who had remained neutral were beginning to pay closer attention. The businessman who had questioned the seating situation lowered his phone and watched openly. A woman across the aisle folded her magazine and leaned forward. Even those trying to avoid the conflict could feel the tension building. Emily Foster stood near the galley with her device held at her side. The manifest still displayed the same information. Monica read, "Seat 2A. No reassignment. No correction. No discrepancy." The facts had not changed. Only the story surrounding them had. Monica finally removed her phone from her pocket again. The movement was calm and deliberate. She unlocked the screen, typed a short message, reviewed it once, and pressed send. That was all. No speech. No threat. No dramatic declaration. Just a single message sent into the quiet. Richard laughed when he saw it. Calling someone to complain? Monica slipped the phone away. No, then what was that? Monica looked toward the front of the aircraft. A notification. Richard smirked. "You think that is going to change anything?" Monica did not answer. Some questions did not deserve explanations. Several seconds passed. Then a minute. Boarding should have been complete by now. Instead, the jet bridge remained attached. The cabin door remained open. Flight attendants moved with increasing urgency, speaking quietly among themselves. Nicole checked her device again. Another notification appeared. This time she visibly frowned. Emily noticed. So did Monica. The senior flight attendant walked several steps toward the cockpit and disappeared behind the door. The moment she left, conversations erupted across first class. "Why are we still sitting here?" one passenger asked. "This should have been resolved already," another replied. Richard shifted in his seat. For the first time, Impatience replaced confidence. The delay no longer felt useful to him. It felt dangerous. Monica stood exactly where she had been standing for the last several minutes. Calm, unmoved, certain. Years earlier, when she had been building her first company, a mentor told her something she never forgot. Real power rarely announced itself. It simply changed the conditions around everyone else. The cockpit door opened again. Nicole emerged looking noticeably different. Her posture was rigid. Her smile was gone. She walked directly toward the front galley and spoke into the interphone. The announcement that followed was brief but startling. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your patience. Departure has been temporarily delayed pending an operational review. The cabin fell silent. Passengers exchanged confused looks. Richard stared forward. Emily's eyes widened. Monica said nothing, because the message she had sent less than 2 minutes earlier had already begun doing exactly what it was designed to do. The announcement changed everything. An operational review was not the kind of phrase passengers expected to hear after a simple seating dispute. Confusion spread through the cabin. People who had ignored the confrontation now paid attention. People who had taken sides began reconsidering them. Richard Collins looked toward Nicole. What exactly does that mean? He asked. Nicole opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time since boarding began, she seemed unsure of her own authority. Her device vibrated once more. She checked the screen and immediately looked away. The color drained slightly from her face. Monica noticed. Emily noticed. Several passengers noticed. Whatever was happening, it was no longer confined to row 2. The cockpit door opened. The captain stepped into the cabin with a serious expression and walked directly toward Nicole. They exchanged a quiet conversation near the galley. Neither appeared comfortable. Richard stood halfway from the seat before sitting back down again. This is absurd, he muttered. All of this over one seat. Monica finally spoke. It stopped being about the seat a long time ago. Richard looked at her. Then what is it about? Monica held his gaze. Judgment. The answer lingered in the air. Around them, passengers listened carefully. Emily watched as the captain glanced toward Monica more than once during his conversation with Nicole. Then both crew members checked information on their devices. Nicole's posture grew even more rigid. The confidence she had displayed earlier was gone. In its place stood uncertainty. The captain walked over to Monica. His tone remained respectful. Ma'am, may I confirm your full name? Several passengers exchanged curious looks. Monica answered calmly. Monica Reed. The captain nodded once and checked his device again. A long silence followed. Then another notification appeared. This one arrived simultaneously on both his screen and Nicole's. The captain read it. Read it again. Then slowly looked up. Across the cabin, conversations stopped. Even Richard seemed uneasy now. Monica slipped her hands into the pockets of her sweater and waited. She had been waiting from the beginning. Waiting for facts to catch up with assumptions. The captain cleared his throat. Ms. Reed, he said carefully, corporate operations has requested direct communication regarding this flight. Richard frowned. Corporate operations? Nobody answered him. Emily felt her pulse quicken. She remembered the priority designation attached to Monica's name. She remembered the manifest. She remembered Nicole insisting that the assignment had changed when it clearly had not. Suddenly pieces began fitting together. Monica looked toward the captain. I assume they have reviewed the situation. They have, he replied. Richard shifted in seat 2A. Can somebody explain what is happening? Monica turned toward him for the first time in several minutes. Her voice remained calm, almost gentle. You occupied a seat assigned to the wrong person. Richard laughed nervously. That is what this is about. Monica shook her head. No, the cabin fell silent. Every eye seemed fixed on row 2. Monica looked around at the passengers, the crew, and finally at Nicole. Then she delivered the sentence that changed the atmosphere completely. You tried to remove the owner-level passenger from a seat she personally authorized within an airline network she helps oversee. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. For one long moment, the entire cabin seemed to forget how to breathe. The silence that followed felt heavier than the aircraft itself. Richard stared at Monica as though the words refused to fit together. Owner-level passenger. Airline network. Corporate operations. None of it matched the story he had constructed the moment she stepped into the cabin. Nicole looked down at her device again. This time she did not try to hide what she was seeing. A new message occupied the screen, marked urgent. The captain received the same notification. Emily watched both reactions and finally understood why the operational review had appeared so suddenly. Monica had not been calling for help. She had been activating accountability. The captain took a measured breath. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, addressing the cabin, "we appreciate your patience while we resolve a matter involving passenger verification and procedural compliance." The statement was professional, but everyone understood what it meant. Something had gone very wrong. Richard shifted uncomfortably in seat 2A. "Look," he said, forcing a laugh. "If there has been some misunderstanding, we can sort it out." Monica regarded him calmly. "It could have been sorted out 20 minutes ago." Nobody disagreed. The businessman across the aisle slowly nodded. The woman with the magazine folded it completely and placed it in her lap. Even passengers who had previously sided with Richard now avoided eye contact. The facts had finally arrived, and facts were difficult things to argue with. Nicole's device chimed again. Her face tightened as she read. The captain looked at his own screen and then spoke quietly to her. She nodded once, though the movement carried none of the confidence she had displayed earlier. Emily remained near the galley, listening. The messages coming from corporate operations were direct. The seating assignment had been verified. The passenger record had been verified. The timeline of the incident was being reviewed in real time. Every decision made since boarding had been logged. Monica had not raised her voice. She had not demanded special treatment. She had simply allowed the process to reveal itself. Richard finally stood from seat 2A. The action seemed smaller than it would have 20 minutes earlier. "I did not know who you were," he said. Monica looked at him. That was never the issue. The words landed with remarkable force. Richard opened his mouth, searching for a response. None came, because deep down, everyone in the cabin understood what she meant. If she had looked different, dressed differently, or matched their expectations of power, the confrontation might never have happened. The seat had been taken because assumptions had been made. Nicole stepped forward. "Ms. Reed," she said carefully, "on behalf of the crew, I apologize for how this situation was handled." Monica listened, but did not immediately respond. The apology hung in the air beside all the earlier explanations, all the changing stories, and all the opportunities that had been ignored. The captain turned toward the cabin. "The matter has been resolved." Yet everyone knew that was only partially true. The seating issue was resolved. The larger lesson was still unfolding. As Monica finally took her place in seat 2A, a quiet wave of realization moved through first class. The people who had witnessed the confrontation were no longer thinking about a boarding pass. They were thinking about judgment, assumptions, and how quickly authority can become blindness when nobody questions it. And while the aircraft remained at the gate awaiting final clearance, the collapse of the old narrative was already complete. The final clearance arrived a few minutes later. The jet bridge pulled away. The cabin door closed. Outside the window, ground crews stepped back from the aircraft as preparations for departure resumed. Yet the atmosphere inside first class felt completely different from the one that had existed less than an hour earlier. Nobody was talking about schedules anymore. Nobody was talking about seat assignments. They were thinking about what they had witnessed. Richard sat several rows behind his original position after accepting a reassigned seat. He spent most of the remaining time staring out the window. The confidence that had carried him through the confrontation had disappeared. Nicole continued her duties, but the polished certainty that once defined every movement was gone. She moved more carefully now, more thoughtfully. Emily Foster returned to her responsibilities as well, though something had changed for her too. Earlier that evening, she had been the newest voice in the room, the easiest person to ignore. Yet she had chosen to trust what she saw instead of what she was told. Sometimes courage arrived quietly, not through speeches, not through grand gestures, just through a decision to acknowledge the truth. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, the captain made a final announcement thanking passengers for their patience. It was brief and professional, the kind of message travelers heard every day. But everyone on board knew this flight would not be remembered as routine. Monica settled comfortably into seat 2A and looked out at the runway lights stretching across the evening sky. She felt no satisfaction in embarrassing anyone. That had never been her goal. She had not boarded the aircraft hoping for a confrontation. She had boarded expecting the same thing every passenger expected: fair treatment, respect, accountability. The aircraft began moving toward the runway. Around her, conversations slowly returned. Some passengers spoke quietly about business. Others returned to books, tablets, and headphones. Yet every so often Monica noticed someone glance in her direction. Not because of her title, not because of her influence, because they had learned something. They had watched assumptions form. They had watched people defend those assumptions. And they had watched those assumptions collapse under the weight of simple facts. Emily passed by her row one final time before takeoff. Their eyes met briefly. Monica smiled. Emily smiled back. No words were necessary. The lesson had already been understood. Several minutes later, as the aircraft accelerated down the runway and lifted into the night sky, the city lights below began shrinking into patterns of gold and white. Monica watched them for a moment before closing her eyes. The conflict was over. The outcome was settled. But the meaning would remain long after the flight ended. Because the real mistake had never been taking a seat. The real mistake had been deciding who belonged there before learning anything about the person standing in front of them. And that was why Monica never raised her voice. She never needed to. She did not change the rules. She simply held people to them. In the end, the seat was returned, the truth was verified, and the flight continued. But the standard had changed. And as the aircraft climbed higher into the darkness, one final thought lingered in the minds of everyone who had witnessed the moment. Monica Reed had not demanded respect. She had demonstrated what respect was supposed to look like.